you all very much, and welcome to everyone for this meeting of the Planning Committee. Before I start the regulations on Planning Committee, David, please turn your camera off. I would like to say that our thoughts are with all those people out there with this terrible virus, if they're suffering or have had family members suffer. But of course, it's the invisible war that we're fighting, and we're trying our utmost to keep carrying on as best we can under all the regulations and adhere to them so that we can carry on progressing anyway in Monmouthshire, which is looking good at the moment as long as all of us adhere to it. But my thoughts are all with those out there as well. The Planning Committee, which is being held fully remotely today, the meeting has been held in accordance with emergency legislation, and that enables the Council to hold this meeting remotely alongside the Council's constitution, and ensures that the Council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is still being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you all switch your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee, to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. All this technology, as we all understand, is new to many of us. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the committee meeting to ensure their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item, to make their request clear in that area, and I will invite you to speak at the relevant point in the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch your camera back on, please. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee, provided the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirements to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this meeting is unable to cast their vote due to technical issues. The decision of this committee will remain valid. As of now, I have had no apologies of absence today, so we will carry on with the committee as we generally do, and we always have a good attendance. That this is new to us all, so please bear with us, and especially with me, it's the first time for me also. I think at the moment we can now go to the first item on the agenda, is to consider the applications that we have in front of us today. And the first one today, as we've had no apologies of absence, but there are two declarations of interest, and those, I don't know if anybody else, I've received no declarations of interest at the moment from any members. Besides, I myself have to declare interest on two items at the end of the committee, and I shall leave the meeting, and it will be then chaired by my Vice Chair, Councillor Peter Clark. So if that's what the procedure will be for this afternoon. The application that is first on the agenda is DM/2019/00225, and this is the erection of a rural enterprise workers dwelling associated with an equestrian unit for dressage training and livery, combined with a change of use from the golf course to equestrian use at Alice Springs Golf Club, Chemist Road, Chemist Commander. And our planning officer is Phil Thomas, this afternoon, and he will introduce himself and the application. Thank you, Phil. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Philip Thomas. I'm Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council. And as the Chair says, I'm going to introduce the first application on the agenda today. I'll just share my screen so that you can see the presentation. Thank you. So I'll give a brief introduction and then I'll show you the slides at an appropriate time in my presentation. So the proposal is located within the grounds of the former Alice Springs Golf Club at Kemmys Commander near Usk. The proposal is for the relocation of an existing equestrian business that's been established since 2007 at Park Farm, Goitre, and the new development would comprise the following: a rural enterprise workers dwelling, 2 stable blocks, an indoor arena, a dressage standard manege, and an access track from the highway, that's the B road, via an existing access point. The site is considered to be open countryside for the purposes of the LDP, and as such, the dwelling part of the application is to be considered as a rural enterprise dwelling under Welsh Government's Technical Advice Note 6, or TAN 6, Planning for Sustainable Rural Communities. The relocation is proposed to enable improved facilities through the provision of those aforementioned items, and the existing business features stabling that is limited to 12 horses in an American barn with 7.4 hectares of paddocks. Labour comprises the applicant and 1 part-time worker, plus apprentice workers from Usk College Equestrian Centre. Excuse me. The horses are kept in a combination of part and full livery. The existing business is fragmented at Park Farm and is hampered in particular by the presence of adjoining companies in nearby industrial units, several of which are B2 general industrial uses such as repair garages, the operation of which are not complementary to the equestrian business, which needs a more tranquil location. And there have been accidents involving horse riders owing to the disturbance from passing vehicles, and this is harming the business's prospects. The proposed new site is at the former Alice Springs Golf Club, as said, which went into receivership in 2016. The site's land block pertaining to this application extends to 23 hectares and is still set out with fairways and belts of trees. It is currently grazed by a tenant sheep as grass keep in order to maintain the grassland in decent condition. The proposed dwelling associated with the business would be sited in close proximity to the proposed equestrian buildings to allow the occupant to have easy access to stabled horses requiring attention at short notice and for monitoring. The proposed dwelling has been reduced in scale at the request of officers. So if we have a look at the slides, the actual site, as you can see from the text at the bottom of the screen, is the area outlined around the Parsonage Farm annotation on the screen there, outlined in red. That's the site, looking at the various buggies and fairway tracks within the site. This shows a more detailed layout of where the house and buildings would go. So right at the top of the screen would be the house and garden. There'd be 2 barns, sort of in an L shape here, although detached. There'd be the yard in between the buildings and the manege, the outdoor arena here. And then there would be an indoor arena here, the other side of this belt of existing planting. There'd also be a lot of new planting in the dark shaded areas here, which have been requested by the council's landscape architect. And the track would come up from the B road up the slope and into the site here, with access directly to the dwelling and the yard here. And that shows the lower part of the site. There's the access down here off the B road. There's actually good visibility in both directions, looking right and left as you emerge from the site. And then it would follow broadly the buggy tracks, the golf buggy tracks, deviating slightly to get into the site then further on up above the slope there. And these are the range of buildings that are proposed. These are the stables. That's the dwelling. Garage has been reduced in scale, and annex has been taken off, and it would actually be 3-bedroom with en suites rather than the 4 that's actually set out in the report. That's the existing enterprise at Park Farm, Goitre. Again, the existing enterprise. That's the existing manège. And then this is the site looking to the south. That's looking, it's well above the slope, which is seen from the B road. You can't actually see this part of the site from the B road because of the topography. This is the upper part of the slope, and there's existing substantial tree belts which will screen the dwelling and the stable buildings and manège from wider views. And that's looking towards where the indoor arena would be. The trees are obviously to remain. There'd also be additional tree planting. Stables would be there. And that's the lower part of the slope, which wouldn't be developed. And if any of the members could see the videos, you get an idea of the surroundings and how the lower part of the slope relates to the upper part. So I'll leave the key material issues in front of the members on the screen there. So the proposal has been assessed against the functional and financial tests in TAN 6. So the functional test is necessary to establish whether it's essential for the proper functioning of the enterprise for one or more workers to be readily available at most times. And the proposal is to increase stable numbers to 26, being split between dressage, stabling and livery. And in this case, the horses compete at the highest levels. Individual attention to detail is critical to ensure that each horse is prepared, trained and managed to be at the peak of its ability for competitions. There could also be unforeseen incidents such as a horse cast in its box or with colic to damage, as well as damage to the stables from the horses, and also severe weather conditions or fire could occur. One high quality broodmare is also kept on the site, which is bred to performance tested stallions in order to produce dressage horses. And during foaling, it is not uncommon that complications and emergencies can occur. It's considered that a need for a round-the-clock on-site presence is justified in this case, particularly considering the quality and value of the horses in relation to security in this case, and the implications of the business should a loss arise as a result of an incident not dealt with promptly. On this basis, it is therefore accepted that there is an essential need for a worker to be resident on site to ensure the welfare needs of the horses are not compromised, as workers living off-site are unable to provide the instant necessary essential level of care and scrutiny. The current labour requirement for existing horses at Park Dressage site is calculated at 2.28 workers, and the proposed dwelling would be occupied by one full-time rural worker. And on this basis, the application meets the requirements of TAN 6 in respect to the labour requirement, and officers consider that the functional test is satisfied. In terms of the financial test, accounts submitted with the application demonstrate that the existing business is financially sound and has seen year-on-year increased profitability. The business has no long-term loans and no overdraft. The cost of construction is anticipated to be approximately £150,000, and this relatively low cost is principally because the applicant's partner is involved in the construction industry and is able to supply and fit many of the building components himself. Profits generated by the business will be able to cover the costs. Based on the information provided, it is accepted that the business is profitable and viable and is capable of being sustained into the future with increasing employment prospects. And as such, it is considered that the financial test is met. There is no objection to the proposal in respect of its landscape impact, subject to additional planting advocated by the council's landscape architect. The siting of the buildings would be above the lower slopes facing the B road and is already reasonably well screened by existing woodland, as well as landscaping planted when the golf course was developed. The additional planting will provide further mitigation so that any impact is minimised. Conditions, including some set out in late correspondence, will be applied to secure the landscaping, manage light spillage and ensure biodiversity enhancement. Access would be via an existing access off the B road with good visibility in both directions. The council's independent assessor has issues with the proposal, as members will have noted, arguing that the project cannot be considered as a relocation of an existing business, as there is an intention to grow the enterprise. Officers agree with the applicant that the current business is constrained by the existing site, and it is considered to be entirely reasonable to wish to expand. There are examples of other successful applications to relocate and expand an existing business comparable to this application that have been approved by other planning authorities. The improvements in amenities at the application site and the certainty that will be given to the business in the new location are considered to outweigh other concerns over the impact of the wholesale relocation. There is clearly an existing need in terms of labour hours required to run the business, regarding which the council's consultant has no issue. In terms of the financial test, the agricultural consultant argues that the extent of the proposed expansion is significant, and secondly, the veracity of the proposed budgets are not supported by the actual past evidence of the existing enterprise. In this respect, it's recognised that the existing business is constrained by its location, and given the credentials of the applicant and the high value of the dressage business as a whole, it's considered that the budget projections can be accepted. Profits are likely to increase over time, and further budget information provided in support of the application shows that the projected profit covers the minimum wage for an agricultural worker for the owner and the mortgage payments necessary to construct the proposed new dwelling. And as such, it's considered that the financial test is met. The size of the dwelling was accepted as being reasonable by the council's independent consultant, and moreover, it's been reduced in scale and equates to just over 180 square metres if you omit the business office and utility area, which are elements that are reasonable to provide and could be built as a separate building, but in doing so, that would be more costly and possibly have more of a visual impact. A condition is proposed to reflect that those areas should not be absorbed into the living accommodation of the dwelling. In late correspondence, there's a request for a green infrastructure bond of £1,500 to improve local public rights of ways. But given that this is for a rural enterprise dwelling, which is effectively a form of affordable housing, then we do not consider that this would meet the tests for a planning obligation. The agent has suggested that there could be a Section 106 agreement in place to ensure that some of the key buildings and infrastructure for the relocated business are built before the dwelling is. This would be sensible, and we would recommend this approach is adopted to prevent the dwelling being built in isolation. We consider this can be conditioned rather than requiring a fully fledged 106 agreement. We'd suggest that the wording reflects something like that the building is not occupied until the stables and indoor arena are completed. But we can work out the wording in association with the agent and applicant to come to a good conclusion in terms of that condition. So we'd recommend approval for this ambitious business with a burgeoning reputation to help it grow and thrive, subject to the additional conditions in late correspondence, and a condition to require the dwelling to be built only after occupied only after certain key buildings or infrastructure are already completed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. The local member, who is not a member of the planning committee, is not here, but was in full agreement to it becoming in front of the planning committee, as it is an extensive new build in the countryside. Also, technically speaking, is this not a second dwelling and not, it doesn't stand alone? And so technically, I don't think we should say that we should have a very large house on it at all. And I have issue with the amenity of shower and that so on for the worker or workers that might be working there should be separate from the house itself and maybe attached to one of the buildings or the garage, which would be more sensible than in their own house. I welcome anybody in the chat bar now. If you have managed all to get in your chat bar now, I have the first one, and hopefully you will not keep coming back and forth because it will take a long time to do this. The first hand raise is Councillor Giles Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Phil has answered some of the questions I had in his presentation. I'm still not entirely convinced about the evidence, and I've got a copy of the email from our agricultural consultant open in front of me from September last year, and I think the problem is, for me at any rate, not that I have an issue with the proposal at all, or the design of it, or the layout. It's just that Richard Anstis's comments are quite clear. There's no ambivalence about them. He's clear that neither the functional need test nor the financial test are met, and it's making that jump that I have trouble with from his clear opinion to officer's interpretation. And your comments as well, Chair, about shouldn't this be treated as a second dwelling, just for me to be clear in my head, are we dealing with it or considering it in terms of a new dwelling on an established rural enterprise, or a new dwelling on a new enterprise, because of the difference in the scale and the proposed increase in the size of the operations, which suggests it ought to be the latter, really? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members.
It's been treated as a new dwelling on an established enterprise.
Phil, your mic's on.
Sorry.
Yeah. I didn't have the same problem as Giles on that Anstis part of the report. I certainly did when I started to read it, but by the time I'd finished getting to the end of the report, I was substantially satisfied on it. And I'm happy with the drainage conditions, the lighting conditions, absolutely essential. And I think it's right that we have the condition that the office, etc., can't be converted to extend the office accommodation. And I think it's a good idea that the commercial buildings go up before the house is occupied. But on the basis of the house, I know there's going to be a full tie on it. But the question that I was asking was basically around what happens if this venture fails. I don't think it's going to. I think it's got a long-term future, but we would be given permission for a new house in the countryside. Now, I know it's an agricultural workers dwelling and would stay at that. If it was no agricultural workers, it would become loosely called an affordable property. But can officers just give some absolute clarification to that? Because I know some questions have been asked from the public on that, and I think it's worth making that absolutely clear. Any other comments I've made? I'll wait for the general comments, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Next, who wishes to speak is Councillor Louise Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm raising some of the similar issues that have been raised before. I mean, about the size of the dwelling, because obviously in terms of the conditions on agricultural, it relates it to it being affordable. And obviously in terms of the size of the dwelling, I'm not sure that would be the case. The second concern I've got is about the muck trailers with regard to the manure. I think there's a dwelling that's about 250 metres away, and I want to know if there needs to be a condition with regard to the location of the muck trailers before they're actually emptied, or a manure pile, in view of the smells associated with the countryside and previous equine things that I've had in my ward that have caused issues with nearby residents, just to prevent anything of that nature. The third issue that I've got is about the independent assessment, which seems to be quite clear that they don't think that the various tests have been met. And myself, looking at the financial side, I can't see the business case myself. Obviously, I can't go into details on that because of the confidential nature of it. The other point is about the need to have a worker there full time. Now, the need for that is normally based on the welfare side of animals, as opposed to their high worth. And, you know, it seems that insurance can deal with the question of the high worth of a particular animals as opposed to their welfare needs to have a worker there. So those are the sort of concerns and questions that I've got at the moment, which aren't clear, because I think with regard to the size, there is actually a metre square thing mentioned in the application, and we've been told something different. And I can't see why office accommodation has to be considered to make the house particularly larger. It looks like these expenses are already part of the existing business, so presumably not necessarily located in the same place in any event. So I do have a number of concerns about this, and I thought the point of having our own independent assessors of whether the policy considerations were met were so that we could actually take account of this independent assessment as opposed to providing reasons why it shouldn't be followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Webb.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I've just one or two comments to make about this application. It's a big application in the open countryside, and I thank you, the delegated panel, for bringing it to this full committee. Thank you. It doesn't look as if we've had any concerns or approval from the Community Council, Chair. I don't know if there's some late correspondence on this, I'm not sure, but I would have thought that they should have been involved. I know community councils aren't meeting so often, but I should have thought that they would need to be involved in this. And also, do we normally mention the need? Do we mention names in reports with regard to the applicant has worked with some gold medal dressage winners? Do we normally mention that in a report? It's not really a planning a condition or something that a planning committee should look at. And basically, I don't know if I would get any support from other members. I think, bearing in mind the size of this application, that members should be able to visit the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Roger Harris next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Murphy's actually asked a question that I was going to ask about the occupancy of the dwelling if the enterprise collapsed. So that one's done. It's just a note that it says on my report that normally accepted thresholds for this type of house, 150 square metres for a rural enterprise, and we're talking about a lot more than this. In fact, you know, there's more than one application today where that's going to be relevant. Anyway, my question has been answered, and I'm sure we're all keeping in mind that it is a big house in the open countryside. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor David Evans next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. I've listened to what's been said now on this application, and I do agree with some of it. I disagree with some of it, but the one thing I do agree with is Councillor Webb asking for a site visit. I think it's a big project, and I think and we at the end of the day are councillors who have to make the decision, and if anything goes wrong, it comes back on us. So I think we should have a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig, I believe you wish to come in next, if there's no more hands up for committee members anyway. Craig?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning in Monmouthshire. I'm just going to pass on to Phil, who's going to answer some of the technical questions which have been asked. And then I think I'll just sum up with a few points with regards to some of the concerns that have been raised by members. Phil, if I just pass to you, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, to go back, is there an echo in here?
That's right.
Is it okay? Yeah. So go back, there's quite a few questions. So going back to Councillor Howard's question about how we've considered the application, it is treated as a new dwelling on an established enterprise in that the enterprise does exist. They own that land there. They are going to rent that land out and relinquish that business and move it lock, stock and barrel, if you like, to this site. So we've treated it as a new dwelling on an established enterprise, as per the actual report that's in front of you. So we've considered it on that basis, and we consider that it does meet the functional and financial tests, notwithstanding the comments of the council's independent assessor. We're not duty bound to agree with that assessment, although I appreciate it. It's helpful if we do. We feel there are mitigating circumstances in this instance, which mean that we can actually recommend approval for the application. In terms of the financial test, we've got to remember that the test is that it's been profitable for one of the previous 3 years before the application is submitted, and the figures justify that in this instance. It's also got labour requirements for 2.28 workers, so this would satisfy one of those particular workers on the site. And in terms of Louise's, Councillor Brown's comments about the need for it, whether it's welfare or other issues, there are welfare reasons why, which are well versed in the report as to why we think a worker should be on there in terms of foaling and colic, etc. But security does come into some of the higher end uses in this instance. So as some of the animals are worth tens of thousands of pounds, the need for security does come into it, and having somebody on hand, obviously rather than CCTV, would be an advantage in this instance. So the combination of welfare and security in this instance, we feel, justifies somebody being on hand night and day in this instance, as well as the labour requirement, which is over two individual workers on site. Councillor Murphy's question about what happens if it fails, the dwelling would be available then for another rural enterprise, be that an agricultural use, or and that could include a retired agricultural worker or farmer, as well as one working in the area at the moment. If also it could be available for another rural enterprise, not just farming, if it did fail. If none of those conditions are met, then it then becomes on offer as an affordable housing unit. So there's various hurdles that are in place before that have to be met before it then becomes offered up as a speculative, or if you like, open market house in the countryside. And in addition, they'd have to, and if they wanted that to happen, they'd have to remove the condition, and we would actually have to be satisfied that there wasn't a current need for rural enterprise dwelling in that area, which I think is quite a high bar set to actually to jump over, if you like, to actually achieve. In terms of its size, it's around, if you remove the home office and boot room, shower room facility, it's about 184 square meters, which we don't feel is excessive. We do say normally around 150 square meters, but there have been others approved which are larger than that. And in this instance, certainly the landscape impact is acceptable, and we feel that the scale of the enterprise means that this size of dwelling would be suitable in this particular location. In terms of a muck heap, it's significantly far enough away from any nearby dwellings so that shouldn't become a problem. The muck heap is going to be near where the stable buildings are. It's not going to be in some peripheral area. It won't be convenient for the operation of the enterprise. So I don't think in this instance we need to worry too much about the environmental issues pertaining from the muck heaps. And environmental health, there is fallback legislation in environmental health in terms of statutory nuisance, but I don't think that that's going to be a problem, present itself as a problem here, because of the extensive land holding available to the applicant, 32 hectares. And in terms of, I think there were, whether there were any others, status of who, yeah, in terms of the status of who the application works with, I think that was given as an indication of the higher end nature of some of what this applicant is trying to achieve, and you know, in terms of dressage. It's not just livery, it's dressage, which is a sort of higher end part of the business, and it's more demanding, more rigorous. The training is much more rigorous than would be in normal equestrian sense. So it kind of adds value really to the status of the application, and there wasn't meant to be any name dropping, for instance, in that. It's just an indication of the nature of the business, I guess. I hope that answers the questions. If I've not answered all of them fully, then forgive me. I've tried.
Thank you, Phil. The question I wanted to know is it technically a second dwelling? Because we've got no evidence that they're completely giving up the one that's only 3 miles away. And I believe when you employ people, you have to have separate amenity for shower, toilet facilities. And I don't believe that it's correct that they should be inside the house if there's no occupant in the house at the time. If somebody requests a shower or whatever, considering the nature of the enterprise, which can be a dirty job, whatever, and you have vet visits and so on, they will all need to be addressed with those facilities. And I still think that the dwelling is far too large for a second dwelling. And if they took out the boot room and all that, could it not be attached to maybe one of the buildings or the back of the garage, where presumably they would have an office? And also, I don't believe we've had the costings of what it might be to build the house, the dwelling, but not for all those extensive buildings, which are going to be colossal, I should imagine. Any come back on that, Phil or Craig? Do you
want to take that, Chair?
Right, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so in terms of the enterprise itself, it's been treated as a new dwelling for an established enterprise. Obviously, there is an existing business developed at Goitra, and this is now being moved and expanded upon to this new location in Alice Springs. In terms of establishing that business, that, as I obviously said, enough evidence has been submitted to convince us and evidence us that there is an established need, a functional need and a financial need for that development to be located. And if we look at it on the broader sort of on the technical advice note for Technical Advice Note 6 for Welsh Government, they're very supportive of supporting rural enterprises, supporting rural businesses, and this is very much the view that we've taken on this planning application, is that we should be supporting this rural business, which have cross benefits for Monmouthshire, and I think it's the right decision to recommend approval from member officers to support this type of business in Monmouthshire within our boundary, and I think it will have additional benefits. I appreciate what some of the comments have been made with regards to the independent assessors recommendation on the application and how they viewed it, but I think, well, our planning officers do take a view based on all the information, take a balanced view, and that's what members are being asked to do today, is take a balanced view based on the information that you have in front of you and the recommendation that's been made. If this business plan is based on expansion, so I think we need to support our rural enterprises and our rural businesses when they try to expand, and this proposed new dwelling would be for an agricultural worker or for an affordable use, to be conditioned up for that. In terms of the scale of the building, the Welsh Government haven't given any guidance within the technical advice note with regards to the scale and size of building. In Monmouthshire, we've had a look at the history of rural dwellings, and there's a range of sizes. So there isn't one size fits all. I think it depends on the scale of the business and the landscape impact of the development. So in terms of this recommendation, we do not feel that the 184 square metres of living space is unacceptable. I appreciate what's being said with regards to the office and the showering area, but given that that would be contained within the dwelling, we do feel on balance that is acceptable. We don't think it's an overly large and significantly property. So given the advice in Technical Advice Note 6, we think the scale of the building is acceptable in this location as we've outlined. In terms of a couple of members, they wanted to see the site and see the landscape impact of the development. I appreciate we are living in difficult times, and usually that would be the case. As members, we would go out and have a look at the site and assess it. Obviously, during the pandemic, that's difficult with the coronavirus regulations. Obviously, we tried to give you as much information as possible in terms of the site videos, the photographs, the plans, and obviously members' own knowledge of areas. So we would hope that the application wasn't deferred for that reason. And also, in addition to that, the application has obviously been viewed by members' officers. Council officers have been out there on your behalf to review the visual impact of the development, which has been assessed by landscape officers as well. So there has been that expertise looking at those details. So I think that's in terms of sort of giving you support and advice in terms of much information I can give you on that. Obviously, it is a balanced decision. It's a difficult decision. It's a big development. I appreciate that. But I think in terms of the rural enterprise and supporting local business and keeping it within this county, I think that the functional test and the financial test on balance has been met, and we are supporting this application.
Thank you for that explanation, Craig. And there's one thing that hasn't worked. We've had all the technical questions now, apart from the fact we're having the screening, everything, but nothing has been mentioned of the surface of the driveway from the main road up to the enterprise. What surface will that be?
I believe that's going to be a track, grass, the central grass verge.
Right, thank you for that. You know, it has to set into the countryside, obviously. I don't think there's any more technical questions as such. We will now have the members' discussion, and the first hand that's been raised for that is Councillor Murphy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I do appreciate what people are saying about having to go to site, but I thought the videos of this site were particularly helpful. I'd love to go up there, but I certainly don't think that we should defer on that basis. As I say, the video I thought was perfectly adequate for that. Look, this is a much better site than where they are now. It gets rid of the danger. It's purpose built. It's in a very suitable location as far as I'm concerned. It would be a valuable facility in the countryside, and it's very important that we support rural enterprise and the spin-off that comes from it. Don't forget that this will not just be an isolated activity. There's going to be a lot more business associated with it, local guest houses, all sorts of things like that. So I think this could well be quite a trigger for the economy of that area. So I'm happy to support it, and if you're looking for somebody to recommend approval, Chair, I'm happy for it to be me.
Right, thank you, Councillor Murphy. I now have, excuse me, Councillor Matt Feakin to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers. I echo in what Phil said, really. For me, we are by and large a rural county. We need to support our rural businesses. The route to this through the rural enterprise dwelling and through the technical advice note is quite clear. And for me personally, I think that we as a council should do everything we can to support the rural economy as it develops and as it changes. Bearing in mind that this is the reuse of a golf course that went out of business. It's a good quality house. I accept that it is slightly larger than what would be normally acceptable. But for me personally, I would rather see all houses be built to a good size and to a good standard, because that is part of our legacy, as it were, that we should be looking to improve the quality of housing stock across our county. So I'm happy with that. It's a good quality stabling system, good quality menage, and good quality access. So for me, the fact that we should be supporting rural businesses, it is the redevelopment of an existing site which is no longer agricultural. I would very happily second Phil's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Feakin. Councillor Louise Brown next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My view on this is probably similar to the one already expressed by the chair. I'm concerned about the size of the dwelling, which seems to be larger than necessary. We were told it was 184 square metres, but that excludes the office and the shower, and I don't see any reason why those shouldn't be separated, you know, because I think they should be commercially separated. I'm also concerned about the financial argument, because we were told that there was 2.28 workers, but looking at the financial statements that we've been sent without any details, obviously 2018 suggested a part-time wage, and 2024 on projections suggests just one notional salary. So I think there's something that needs to be looked at with regard to the financial tests that are being put forward by the applicant, and I think I would prefer to have some type of manure condition, really, just to make sure that it is sited near the stables and away from any dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Alan Davis next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very much in favour of this sort of rural enterprise development. I was concerned about the dwelling itself, and when I read the documentation initially, I thought, why has it got 4 bedrooms? So I was pleased to see that that had been reduced slightly. I still have some concerns about that, but I think in view of the safeguards that we have in place and in view of the potential for this enterprise, I would support approval of it. And we all hope, I'm sure, that it'll take off and be very successful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tony Eason next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I reiterate the comments you made at the beginning of this application, and which Councillor Brown has said later on. I have concerns about the, like, find it on the map, on the plans. I have concerns that it's not an immodest, property. Each bedroom has got an ensuite, but downstairs, the utility rooms and office and hall are all attached directly to the living quarters, which I don't find very comfortable, quite honestly. I think that the office and the utility showroom should not be directly connected to the living quarters. As you can see, the kitchen and dining room go straight into the utility room, and those sort of actions, like the toilet, are all joined into the house, and I find that is a difficult thing for me to support. I'd like to see the office and the utility facilities for the workers not directly connected to the house. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no more raised hands, I don't believe now, so I believe the next procedure, because we're all learning at doing this at the moment, I think the next procedure after this first application will be the officer to, before we go to the vote, give a brief overview of what the members have suggested and of the public, to the public, of the process. Is that going to be you, Craig, or Phil?
Yes, I can do that, Ruth. That's the problem. Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
In terms of, there's a few additional queries just raised then in that members' discussion, so I just want to clear up some of those points. And again, I'd reiterate in terms of the scale of the dwelling, there is no guidance from Welsh Government in terms of the scale of development. In terms of an agricultural workers dwelling, it is very much based on a case-by-case basis and reviewing what's right for that enterprise and for that landscape as well. And that's why this is a subjective matter in terms of whether this scale of building is appropriate. But as officers, as under the report, we do feel it is an acceptable size. And in Monmouthshire, we have allowed larger agricultural workers dwellings as well. In terms of the concern with regards to the financial test, it has we do consider that it does meet the financial test in terms of the need for a full-time worker, so that test has been met, and we fully appreciate that there is a balance here, a judgment to be made here in terms of moving the business from Goitra and expanding the business in this location. But as Councillor Feakins has outlined, we also feel that this is an existing golf club, and it's an appropriate use to establish a rural business within this area. With regards to the concerns from Councillor Brown on the environmental health issue with regards to the manure, if that is something that members are minded to, we could place a condition on to secure the location of that. As officers, we don't feel that's necessary given environmental health regulations, but if that is something the members were minded to do, then we could add that on. But I think there has been a motion to approve from Councillor Murphy, so I would suggest, Chair, that you would take a vote based on the report as it stands, with an additional condition in relation to the enterprise buildings being constructed before the occupation of the dwelling.
Thank you for that, Craig. But looking at the plans myself, and yes, as Councillor Easton also alluded to, about there being utility and so on at the dwelling, which you would want anyway in a farmhouse dwelling. It's just I have concerns that there's nowhere in that scale of plans for showering and toilets for the workers themselves that might be employed there at the enterprise. I think that should, because I believe by law you are supposed to provide those for anybody that you employ. So I would like to see something mentioned to the applicant about that. But obviously a toilet downstairs and a shower would be the same on any, most probably rural dwellings anyway. But anyway, that's my observation. And Councillor Murphy, you have suggested to move, and you have a seconder, I believe, in Councillor Matt Feakin. I think now maybe we could go to the vote. Has everybody switched on their chat bar now for the vote, please?
Sorry, can I ask about the condition first, before the vote? Chair.
I'll have to unmute again. Craig, is there any question of anything different on what we've agreed to with conditions?
Well, I was going to suggest, Chair, that we take a vote based on the report plus the condition we've added without the new one, and if people did want the new one, went on to suggest that. Yes.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Brown? I believe it was the manure heap that you were most concerned about.
Sorry, I'm not clear. Are we voting without the condition or with the condition?
So we'll go with it. So with Chair, can I speak? Yes.
Yes, carry on.
Just to clarify, in terms of the vote, so you're voting on the recommendation of officers to approve the application subject to the conditions outlined in the report, plus one condition to secure the location of the manure, and one condition to establish that the agricultural workers' dwelling will not be occupied until the 50% of the buildings are constructed.
Yes, because there are quite a few conditions with lighting and so on already in the report, so we're voting on all of that. Everybody clear on that now? And we'll go to the vote. Right, thank you. We'll now go to the vote, please, members. Thank you, members. I believe Denzel will now announce the result of that vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had 10 votes in, 6 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So that motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denzel. We now go on to the next application of the day. And I believe this one is being presented.
Chair, could I ask a question before we move on? We've just had the results, 641. How many members are in the chamber? And
there's nobody in the chamber, Councillor Easton.
All right, I'm using the word chamber generally. How many are on the committee today? We had a 6-4 and a 1. Did anybody have difficulty voting? Because there's more than 11 people there, isn't there?
I have not received any notice of any apologies at all from the committee today, and I did stress last week I would wish to receive them.
Yeah.
So could
There's a comment in the chat bar.
Sorry.
That's not-
Hang on a minute, Councillor Eason. I
Yeah.
believe our duty officer, or is the man in gold, is John Pearson, and he will announce the names of the members that are here today.
So we got
Councillor, Miss Perry says that's not a clear majority.
no, it's not. We've got 15 in the meeting. There's 11 votes in the chat bar, and it's not a majority for what we've got in the meeting. So we'll move to just doing a call out on an individual vote, individual basis. So if we can just go back, we'll call out the names. If you can just call out if you're for or against, and we'll declare the result off the back of that second vote then, just so we're clear. Everybody okay with that?
About that?
Okay.
No.
Please
No.
hold on for a moment, and John will ask for names in a moment, please. You will then have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair, it's Richard Williams here. If you're happy, I will call out the names when you're ready.
Yes, I think we're ready, Richard.
Ruth.
Yes, Councillor Clark.
This was not an open vote, and the problem is that somebody's on this meeting who are not voting.
That's
That's
what
the
I said.
problem. It's not which way we voted.
Well, we'll see what happens now and then make sure we're all okay with the next one.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. Sorry,
You're
John.
right, Tony.
Yeah.
Richard is now going to call out your name, so you'll have to unmute and give your answer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dovey.
For.
Councillor Eason.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Feakins.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Higginson. Councillor Higginson.
Hmm.
Should we
For.
come back?
Oh,
For.
sorry.
Was that Councillor Higginson shouting for? Are you there, Councillor Higginson? Should we move on to the next one, Chair?
Yes,
While we come
yes,
back?
please.
Councillor Howard.
Against.
Councillor Howard, did you say against? Sorry, it was the
I
meeting.
did, Richard, against.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Webb.
Against.
And Councillor Woodhouse.
For.
And if we could go back to Councillor Higginson.
Has he unmuted his microphone?
Councillor Higginson, are you there?
Could somebody phone him? He might be. That's what Anne did to me the other day. She phoned me.
Do you want to ring him?
Something wrong.
I'll ring him now.
Councillor Higginson, I've just unmuted your mic.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can
Yes.
hear you now, yes. How do you want to
I'm
vote?
for.
You're for, okay.
Right.
Thank
Right.
you, Chair. I'll just add those up now.
Right. Thank you. Everybody now is accounted for, and Denzel will give the vote, please.
Yes, so that with that revote there, it's 9 for and 6 against, so the motion is passed again.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denzel. Quite close, actually, but we must move on and look forward to that. The next application this afternoon is DM/stroke 2019/00332, and this is another agricultural dwelling in the countryside at Lentilio Cresceni, and it's going to be presented today by Andrew Jones, our planning officer. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager. So this application is presented to committee today following referral from the delegated panel. It was originally presented to the panel owing to an objection from the local community council. So the site, which you can see on screen now, known as Brook Farm, which is located at Whitecastle. This is a calf rearing and dairy farm enterprise that is operated in conjunction with Bryn Edric Farm, which is located approximately 6 miles away. I'm just going to try and take control of the slides. So this is an outline application, and it's for a second rural enterprise dwelling, the other being located at Bryn Edric, that was consented in 2012. I haven't got control of the screen at the moment, I do apologise. Just trying to gain control of the screen. Unless, Phil, if you could just slowly go through the slides, I don't seem to be able to control the slides. So, as you can see on screen, in terms of layout, there are existing modern agricultural buildings that you can see highlighted in grey in the shaded area on screen, and a new access that would see a driveway run close to the field boundary along the western side. So I say this is an outline application, and scale parameters for the dwelling would see as follows: a width of between 7 meters to 15 meters, a depth of 7 meters to 12 meters, and an overall height of between 5 and 6 meters. These have been amended following negotiation by the case officer that would now allow for a single storey dwelling only and an absolute maximum of up to 180 square meters. I'm just going to see if I can change the slides. Apologies, I can't move the slides on. So just want to show you the layout and the site photographs just to sort of quickly talk you through.
Could I just check where we are?
So this is
a site plan with a cross-edged area at about 35 minutes past the hour down in the left-hand corner. That's what I've got, with some slides on the left-hand side.
That's what I thought.
But you see, they were county correctly. Yes.
Okay.
Andrew, I've stopped sharing now, so if you want to assume control. Okay,
I'll have to open up again, sorry. Apologies for this, members.
And my chat
I've got them open. So,
up. I don't know where that is.
I can do it, Andrew. I'll move them on for you.
Okay, if you could just move slowly through the slides, Phil, that'd be great. Yeah. Thank you. Apologies, members.
This is technology. We're all learning.
Steph's coming with a big spanner.
Please turn your mic off, Councillor Dovey.
Right, so just quickly look through the photographs. So, like I said, that's if you go back the layout slide, Phil. Thank you. So that's the new access leading with the track along the western edge of the boundary, with the new dwelling indicated as at the sort of northerly point of the site, and there would be an orchard created in that gap then between the unnamed road at the bottom and the track. So just in terms of real context then, the photographs, you can see there, those are the existing buildings shown in photograph 1. Photograph 3, where the sort of access would lead, and then you can see that bank of trees along the western edge that would provide screening for the access route and the dwelling. And then on the next slide, that's roughly almost where those, you can see those tyre marks there, that's roughly where the driveway would run up to the proposed dwelling. So if you just move on to the next slide, Phil. So similar to the last application members have considered, in terms of principle, the central issue is whether the provision of a new dwelling accords with TAN 6 requirements for a second dwelling. Summary of the tests as set out in paragraph 4.4.1 is presented on screen in the next slide, and members would have seen a detailed assessment in the officer's report. But I'd just like to draw on some of the key issues in respect of TAN 6. In terms of the functional need and for essential purposes, officers are satisfied that these are acceptable, and this includes being available for carving, dealing with emergencies such as injured or trapped animals, and also to be present on site to detect diseases early on. And also in terms of need, the submitted evidence shows there is labour need for 3.45 farm workers. So clearly this is above the test set out in Technical Advice Note 6. Now the Council's consultant has raised some concerns with issues such as stock fluctuating initially in 2011. However, evidence has been provided showing a clear intention to replenish stock and to grow the enterprise across the whole of the enterprise, which consists of the 2 sites. On that point, the consultant also questioned whether an artificial need had been created by the farming units being physically separated. However, the applicant has tried to purchase land at the other site, Bryn Edric, and whilst this would have been his preference, adjoining land has not been available for sale. And therefore, as officers, we are satisfied that there are no realistic options for the enterprise to grow in just the one location. The consultant also raised the point of whether a second dwelling would be better placed at Bryn Edric and existing buildings reorganised. However, the cost of doing this and moving the entire enterprise to Bryn Edric would be substantial and far exceed the cost of a new dwelling at Brook Farm. The original objection from the Community Council about the planning history of the site, this is set out in full, summarised in the officer's report, and also includes analysis of the planning history, and there's not considered to be an issue in this respect. Now, in terms of visual impact, a number of positions have been looked at for this site, and some have been dismissed for reasons including poor ground conditions and drainage, which has seen the location now indicated as the preferred location. And whilst this is elevated, it does, as I mentioned earlier, sit close to a mature bank of trees along the edge of the field. In terms of the size of the dwelling, as I noted earlier, there have been reduced from what was originally proposed, and the scale parameters now do allow flexibility in terms of the shape of the footprint. Taken as a maximum rectangular shape, this would be 180 square meters. However, as appearance is still a reserve matter, then such a form would be within the authority's gift to consider the visual impact and whether or not this was acceptable at the reserve matter stage. In addition, the overall size could also include a home office, boot room, utility space, as well as an integral garage, as is shown on the indicative plans. Similarly, as discussed during the previous application, there is no statutory guidance on the commensurate size of a rural enterprise dwelling, and in case law, it's clear that each case is on its own merits and what could be afforded. After much consideration and negotiation, officers are of the view that given the possibility of office space and garaging, as well as the constraint of appearance and visual impact being considered at reserve matter stage, that the scale parameters now proposed are on balance acceptable. With regards to access, no objection has been received from highways. It would have been impossible to achieve this through the existing access, given the position of the existing agricultural buildings and the need to travel through them. And the proposed access also has good sight lines of approximately 70 metres in either direction. In summary, the tests in TAN 6 are clear and officers weigh these against them and are satisfied that all are met. TAN 6 is clear from the outset that the planning system has a key role in the delivery of sustainable rural communities. It can do this by ensuring that appropriate development takes place in the right place at the right time by making available sufficient land for people to provide homes and employment opportunities for local people, helping to sustain rural services and enterprises. Officers' view is that the TAN expects a degree of fluctuation in accounts, particularly in agriculture, by only requiring 1 in 3 years to be profitable. In this instance, the applicant is a career farmer in his latter years who has managed to maintain a farming business throughout his career without folding. Therefore, the application, subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report, including the TAN 6 occupancy condition, is therefore presented with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you for that detailed report, Andrew. As it is in my ward, I know I should perhaps speak first, but I will leave it for the members to raise any technical concerns that they wish to with you now, and then I'll sum up my either technical questions or with the discussions. I have not had the chat bar for hands, please.
I've raised my hand, Chair.
Right. Oh, I see now. Thank you, Councillor Feakin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. Just the form is a reserved matter, Andrew, and that's calculated to be approximately 180 square metres. Is that the footprint's going to be 180 square metres or the living space? So that's going to be a big difference.
Yeah, so just answer that quickly.
Yes, certainly, Andrew.
Yeah, Councillor Feakins, yeah, that is a sort of a maximum external space based on the scale parameters. So I said the scale parameters, you took the upper limits for both the width and the length. That's you would arrive at 180 square meters. So if you took it, say, the easiest way to describe that would be as a rectangular shape block, then that's what it would be, 180 square meters. But that would then have to be factored against, as I said, the visual appearance of that, the landscape impact of that. So there is flexibility, and obviously the lower parameters is as low as 7 meters. So there could be, obviously it leaves us room for negotiation in terms of the sort of form of the dwelling at the reserve matter stage.
Chair, can I just come back for a bit of clarity in there, if I may?
Yes. Carry on.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chair. And so Andrew, just on that single point there, so we're looking at the rectangular form of 180 square meters. If that was a bungalow, it'd be 180 square meters bungalow. Does that mean that by putting another layer on top of that, it could be a double that size?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't believe so. I think when you're talking about square meterage, I believe that's total, whether it's upper and lower. Is that correct, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the height is also restricted, so
yes.
This would be between 5 and 6 meters. So on that basis, it would make it very difficult to achieve upper floor accommodation, given the restricted height parameters. So, like I said, the 180 is the absolute maximum that would be permitted, but that's not to say that something that came in at maximum parameters visually and appearance-wise would be acceptable. It's still within our gift to work within the parameters. These are just parameters.
Thank you. Councillor Louise Brown, next, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think, thank you, Chair. I think my question has probably been just answered, actually. It's really to do with making sure that it is a one-storey thing. Can we put in one story as opposed to the dimensions being proposed in terms of height, which I think is 5 to 6 meters? Is it possible on an outline application to make sure that it is only one story? Thank you. Because I think there were landscape issues, weren't there?
Yeah, it's advised because of the lie of the land, I believe.
Yes, Chair. I mean, we could include that condition if I think that would satisfy members' concerns. I think clearly that was a concern shared by officers, that there was a difficulty in choosing the right site, as I said earlier, because the ground conditions. This had suitable ground conditions, but is naturally elevated, so a single-storey property would be most appropriate. And I think Councillor Brown's suggestion of a condition in addition to the size limits, which we're required to, because this is an outline application, is something that could be accommodated.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the points that's being made, but this is only an outline application. I'm sure we can sort all of this out at the reserve matters stage. So I wouldn't get too concerned. I know Councillor Feakins has put in the chat bar about the danger of a dormer bungalow, but again, we can deal with that when the detailed application comes in. Clearly, we do have to have a property because of the calf rearing status, because as we know, we've already had an appeal of a very similar case in another part of the county where the inspector determined that was the case. So I think we'll hang fire till we get the detailed application, and then we can see what that is.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Giles Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Murphy's touched on something that I was thinking about while I was listening to the debate and the previous enterprise dwelling on that given site. Although I think if I remember rightly, the consent was a temporary one. So the questions I have are in terms of the scale. Matt's picked up on that. And that if you're looking at 180 metres squared, average house size in the UK is under 100 square metres. That's approaching the sort of footprint of almost a 5-bedroom dwelling. So I'm just concerned that it may be a little bit large then, and do we need to look at the scale parameters, although obviously the issue of the height prevents it being a dormer or a 2-storey dwelling. And also, given that it's outlined, and this is a question for the officers, within the supporting documentation and the dwelling appraisal, how would the requirement to be able to demonstrate the size and the nature of the dwelling that the enterprise could afford to build, how can that be demonstrated when it's an outline consent? Thank you.
And Andrew?
Just having some.
Right, thank you. It takes a while to unmute sometimes.
It does. Yeah, I mean, the size in terms of it being commensurate to the size of the operation, size of the holding, and how to justify how this enterprise could afford a dwelling of that size. Like I said, there isn't, let's say, statutory guidance, unfortunately, on size of operations, size of holdings versus what size of dwelling is appropriate. I think we're satisfied, say the financial tests are met, that the business is sustainable and has shown profit with a reasonable chance of maintaining to do so. The building, say up to, again, I think that's the key message, is that this is up to 100, maximum of 180 square meters, which could include, as I said earlier, it could include the need for an office space, utility space, and as shown on the indicative drawing, garaging space, which would significantly reduce the actual internal living space, probably much closer and possibly below the sort of previous sort of rules of thumb around 150 square meters as being suitable for rural enterprise dwelling. So I think if you factor all of that into it and take a balanced view, I think officers' view is that scale for that enterprise on balance is okay and acceptable.
Thank you, Andrew. I mean, perhaps I can. Sorry, I thought I could come in with some sort of clarity, being in a similar situation with a second dwelling on an established farm. You do need a garage in the countryside. We've got a boot room and utility all contained in the garage. So it does then leave you then to the fact that you haven't got a lot of cluttered buildings around the countryside either. Whether that helps the situation, I don't know. Did you wish to come back, Giles?
Yeah, just very quickly, if I may, and I say it's not only an issue I have with the second dwelling. That's fine. All I want to do is make sure that it aligns with TAN 6, and that the part that concerns me is section 410, paragraph 410(2), which requires the appraisal and the financial test to assess the size of the dwelling that the enterprise can afford to build and maintain. And all I want to be sure of is that test has been met, and we have evidence of that, which I think could be a little bit tricky because of it being outlined. And that was really why I asked the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as I said, it's in my ward. I don't have a problem with it. I do understand that they are trying to expand. They came there not that long ago, and they're building up, and they could not get more land in the vicinity. The nearest, and the fortunate thing with this parcel of land, as well as there's also the buildings on it, so that makes it far more viable. And I know personally that you need somebody if you've got two parts to a farming enterprise, as we brought up earlier, with welfare of stock, because now we cannot rely on large animal vets. Are very scarce now. They've removed any large-scale vet facility in Monmouth, Abergavenny. So, you know, if you've got an animal in distress, very often you have to wait for a vet. Ours comes from Hereford, which is considerable, but you need somebody there initially. That could be a matter of life and death for any sort of animal in distress, and also as far as control of disease. And when you've got cattle and so on, there's always the possibility of having TB, and if you can isolate that, that's even better. But that's my own personal view on when you can separate two sort of things, but at the same time there's an umbrella as one enterprise. If that's any clarity, I don't know. So if anybody else wishes to comment, please do so.
I wait to speak, Chair.
So am I, Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Sorry, this muting button is quite difficult sometimes. Councillor Easton, then Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. Waiting to call us in. This is simply an outline planning application, which I find acceptable on the basis that the proposer is not looking to go more than 180 square metres. He certainly won't be going to 49 square metres. Issues such as access across the field, which we saw on Phil's video, and closest to the brook and drainage and all, will certainly come into the equation when I presume that we should support this outline plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine was just really to suggest about adding the condition about one story, and I think Councillor Feakins has got a similar comment in relation to conditions in terms of metres squared, but I'll leave that to him. But the officers seem to be quite happy with adding that one story condition. That was really just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Matthew Feakin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, for me, the reservation around 180 metres squared was largely to avoid the possibility of a house being double that size being put on the site just by simply increasing the height slightly. I would be encouraged very much so if we could condition 180 metres squared for the floor space or habitable floor space. That puts it into some sort of context for the site and probably talks to some of the concerns of the local residents as well. I personally would prefer that we condition it simply on 180 metres habitable floor space rather than a single story, because it might be that a design comes back slightly different than that. But that's what I would prefer rather than a single story, if that's possible.
Thank you.
Could I, sorry, Chair, could I come back on that? Because
very quickly, because I do not want to have people keeping coming back and for
Yeah, it's just that I think the reason for one story is to do with the landscape reason.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is because of the land, the lie of the
So it's
land.
not to do with anything apart from that. So I think it's useful to have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to support members and sort of clarify a few points with regards to the size of a agricultural workers dwelling again. Again, I don't keep repeating myself, but there isn't any guidance in Technical Advice Note 6, and I echo here what Councillor Howard has suggested with regards to paragraph 4.10 and reviewing whether the business can establish it, and that would have been considered as part of the assessment, the financial test, and looking at it in terms of whether it can afford that. And on balance, officers have suggested that yes, it can meet that, and it would meet the financial test. I think that the discussion around size is an interesting one about dwelling and whether it's of an appropriate scale for that particular development. And in Monmouthshire, we've dealt with many different agricultural dwellings and put limits on the floor space. The back floor space would also could be on a single story level, but if the landscape allows it, it would allow for maybe 1.5 story or 2 story. It all depends on looking at all of those things holistically. So I think the parameters that have been outlined I consider acceptable. We do consider a 6 metre height to be appropriate for this landscape setting, and that would be the maximum of it. In terms of helping members considering that the floor space that's been outlined, you could put a condition on for 100 metres squared, and that would include any additional roof space as well. So 180% living space for that property would be the maximum. If that was, or we could look at a different figure, but as officers outlined in the report, we do support the proposed development, and there isn't any strict guidance on size. So if members are minded to, when we go into the next section, maybe indicate that you're happy with that condition when you pass a motion, then that would be useful.
Right. As it's in my ward, I move approval. And do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Second, yeah.
Right, that's seconded by Councillor Murphy. Thank you very much. And we shall now go to the vote.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Are we voting in relation to just what condition is now placed on it in relation to size or stories? Can that be clarified, please?
I think quite honestly, as this is outlined, a lot of this will come up in reserved matters. Is that correct, Andrew? Yep. Craig?
Yes.
There we go. Yes, it would. I mean, the scale parameters are a requirement of its because of its outline nature. There seems to be some sort of conflicting sort of views on whether it be best further managed by a single story only condition or a floor area, internal floor area condition. And like I said, I mean the concerns of it being higher, I mean both are sort of fairly safeguarded. The concerns of it being single story are in some ways afforded protection because of the limits on the upper height of 6 meters. But I mean, it would be, I suppose it's for members really, whether, I mean, a condition could include both. It could be a single story only with a maximum of 180 square meters, or just single story. It's within members' gift. But I think even without that condition, you know, the scale parameters provide enough safeguard for us at the reserve matter stage. So if there's a concern that perhaps the 180 square meters would, you know, it gives us further protection because, say, that upper height would make a Zolma bungalow particularly difficult to achieve.
Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, can we actually just clarify what additional conditions, if any, are being added? Thank you.
I don't know if any are being actually added. I think the basic thing is what's outlined in the report at this outlined stage, and I think that is the crucial part of it. Any more clear things that you could be said to that, Andrew?
Shall I come in there, Chair? In terms of
yes, certainly.
Support, is it well, we could put a condition on it if members in the discussion box now wanted to say if obviously you've made the motion, Ruth, to approve the application. Is that to approve the application as it stands, or would you want a condition on there for 180 metres squared?
I believe I would like it as it stands in outline, and some of these things can be addressed because it'll have to come back to us as reserved matters. And I read in the report, it was advised that it should anyway only be a single story simply because the lie of the land. So it would be very difficult to get away from that.
I would agree with that, Chair.
Right.
So I would suggest, Chair, taking a vote based on that with no additional conditions as outlined in the report.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Right, will all members now please go to the chat bar and place your vote? Have you all voted and submitted your vote?
11, 12.
Two to go.
Please try it again if you feel as though you haven't done it correctly for 4, against, abstain, and then please press submit. How many responses did you expect, Denzel?
I think we were expecting 15. We've had 14, but it's quite a clear majority this time. There's 11 for, there's 1 against, and there's 2 abstentions. So even if
it's going to
the
be
member
carried.
who hasn't been able to vote, it voted against, it would still be carried. So that motion has been carried. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that, Denzel. We're getting there. So that application has been carried. We now go to the next application. And I believe this is going to be presented by Amy Longford. This is DM 2019/01062, and this is the Kao Farm at Llandeni. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to check everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Amy Longford. I'm the Development Management Area Manager. This application for DM 2019/01062 is for a barn conversion at the Kao, named as Units 6 and 7. It's been presented to you today as the applicant is a relative of an elected member. The site is located just north of the village of Llandeni. As you can see on the map there, the little blue marker with the red dot is the Kao. For the context, planning permission and listed building consent has been granted for the conversion of the large listed barn adjacent to the subject building, but this application relates to the cow byre and lambing shed, which is considered to be part of the curtilage of the listed building. So for clarity, there's a large barn that is listed, and this single-storey barn is considered to be afforded curtilage protection. So the application in front of you today is for planning permission for 2 residential units. There is a concurrent listed building consent application also for these changes. The principle of the conversion has been approved under DM 2016, and this application now seeks design changes from that previous application. These include an external stone staircases to the rear, an extension to the northwest corner of the barn, and removal of a small section of courtyard wall. As you can see from the photos, the application cites a typical traditional farmstead, and the building in question is constructed in stone with a pan-tile roof. It's quite a simple single-storey agricultural building. As discussed, the principle of conversion has already been approved, and this application relates only to design changes. However, the buildings are still considered to be suitable for conversion to residential and meet all the tests within H4. The building questions behind the timber framed metal shelter shed, which will be removed to expose that northern elevation. If we could just go back a little bit in those photographs, please. And again. And again. So this timber framed metal sheet shelter will be removed, and that will become the north elevation of the property. If we move on back to the site plan, if that's okay, I can just confirm exactly where this barn is in relation to the others. So as you come into the main access track, the KO farmhouse is the first building you come to, and that's right, yeah. And the former Quaker meeting house, which is the large barn, is in the centre of the site, and the cow byre and shelter shed, which relates to this application, is in the southwest corner. The existing and proposed plans show the building to be retained as existing, all existing openings utilised, and the designs of the buildings has been changed in line with the Heritage Officer's requests. The building now accommodates two two-bedroom units. As said, the application meets all the policy requirements, mainly H4 for the conversion of buildings in the open countryside to residential, being of traditional construction and fully capable of conversion. The extension to the northwest corner is a small and very modest extension built off the existing tall stone wall which runs to the northwest. All of the other design changes proposed are considered to be appropriate and in context of this building of this status, and have been discussed with the Heritage Officer. In general, consultations have been quite supportive. Raglan Town Council raised no objections. NRW requested some mitigation, which has been fully accommodated. The highways have raised no objections. Parking provision meets all the standards on site, and the application will be subject to sole SUDs. In relation to affordable housing, the current SPG dated 2019 excludes conversions of barns for up to 4 units or listed buildings of up to 4 units. Therefore, the current application for 2 is exempt from an affordable housing contribution. When in tandem with the adjacent listed building, the cumulative total is 4, and so this still remains under the threshold. The application is considered to be exempt from affordable housing contribution. Overall, the application is considered to be policy compliant. The principle of the conversion has been established, and the amendments to the design are considered to be acceptable. The reuse and restoration of the listed building is welcomed. Therefore, the application for the conversion to 2 residential units is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the officer's reports.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy. I'm sure I'll have the list in the chat bar now of those wishing to speak. The Raglan County Councillor is not on the planning committee, and I've had no comment from her at present. Right. The first one, I believe, to raise his hand is Councillor Roger Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a point of information. It says here, before us simply because the applicant is related to an elected member. If that wasn't the case, I presume the officers would have taken this in their stride, and it wouldn't have had to come before the committee, i.e. they would have said, yes, it's a valid application. If that is the case, then I'm happy to move approval.
Yes, that is correct, yeah.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Councillor Roger Harris. We now have Councillor Giles Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I second the recommendation, but just think there should be an addition to conditions 6 and 7 and some reference to the mitigation being retained in perpetuity. It's just missing that on both of them, that's all. Otherwise, thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Maureen Powell, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't mean to put my hand up. I moved the side thing and my hand came up twice. I'm very sorry, I apologise.
You do not wish to comment at all?
No, I'm quite happy with the application.
Right, thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Tony Eason. Councillor Eason? Are you mute or not with us? Councillor Eason?
I'm with you now. I've lost the
Thank
screen.
you. Thank you.
Could the officer just explain the reasons why no SIL contributions were attributable to this site? Because quite a big site, and from what I can see on the plans, which I got lost on, there are 6 properties. And why is there no contribution for affordable housing?
That's a good question, thank you. The first 2 units were created in the farmhouse, which is subdivided into 2. And under that application, there was a commuted sum required for an affordable housing contribution at that point, and a section 106 signed on determination of that application. The application for the large barn and for this cow byre and lambing shed now falls under the requirement in the new supplementary planning guidance approved in 2019. So there are 4 units in total now, and that, as I say, falls under that requirement. So there is no requirement for a financial contribution here.
So for a 6 building plot, we've had contributions from 2 properties. That's all, is it?
Yes, because the 4 are exempt.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to question Amy for anything? No. Well, I think we'll now go to general discussion. If members have any more general questions they need to have clarification on. Nothing at all? Right, I mean, I think now we can, do you wish to sum up on that, or Craig, before we go to the vote?
I can just clarify what we're voting on.
Yes.
Application DM 2019-01062, the proposed conversion and extension of former cow byre and lambing shed into 2 residential units 6 and 7 at the KO farm, is recommended for approval subject to the conditions outlined in the officer's report, where conditions 5 and 6 will be, in relation to the mitigation, will be amended just to clarify that the mitigation put in place will be maintained in perpetuity.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Amy. We can go now to the vote as soon as I have clarity that I believe it was moved for approval by Councillor Harris and seconded, I believe, was it Councillor Powell? I'd like clarity on that, please.
I seconded it, Chair.
Councillor Giles Howard seconded. Right, yeah. We'll now go to the vote, please. Still waiting for a couple of votes. Please try and press again if you have not done so. Still one more. It is clearly carried.
Yeah, Chair, we've had 14 responses. There are 13 for and 1 abstention. So again, as with the last vote, even if the 1 member who hasn't been able to vote were to vote either way, it wouldn't change the outcome. So that motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denzel. We now go on to the next application, and this is an Abergavenny application DM/2019/01214, and this is presented by Phil Thomas. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. This is just before us. I'll be very brief for this one. This is just before us because it was recommended to be refused or minded to be refused by members at the March meeting. The reason for refusal is set out in the report, and it's now before members to reconsider and make a decision on it. Just running through the slides, it's a narrow garage site in the conservation area in Fosterville Crescent in Abergavenny. There's a variety of houses in and around, including Edwardian villas. That shows the site in context. It's a narrow site in relation to the other properties in the area. That's what's proposed on the site. and that was a previous proposal there, which was even higher. And that was a previously withdrawn proposal as well that came to committee as well. So that's the summary of it, and that's the reason for refusal as well, set out there before you in the presentation. So it's now for members to make a decision. Thank you.
I personally don't think, the local members there, I personally don't think there's any need to prolong the meeting by more discussions on it. It was pretty well aired at the last meeting. So Councillor Powell, how do you wish to move it as a refusal?
I move it as a refusal.
Right, thank you, Councillor Powell. That's your wish, but we shall all vote anyway. If you've got your chat bar up, we shall now go to the vote. Thank you.
Chair, we haven't got a seconder.
Oh, sorry, seconded. Please, do you wish to second it, Councillor Harris, being an Abergavenny resident?
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. It is seconded by Councillor Harris then, so we'll please now go to the vote.
Sorry, I don't think there's a vote up.
Oh, we haven't got the chat bar, who's ever controlling that in the Democratic Services. We haven't got.
It's on its way.
Right. It's come up now. Thank you very much indeed. That is the correct application.
Chair, can I just clarification? Are we voting for?
Sorry, Councillor Harris, I think we want clarity on this one. Is it against refusal or for refusal? And I think there has been a mistake on there, and I think as we have agreed it was for refusal, we should be voting for.
I agree.
Okay, could we open the ballot again, Chair? Could we open the ballot again?
Yeah, can we start the vote again then?
Yes, please. I have voted again. All members clear on that now? Two more responses needed, but I think it will be carried. Denzel, are you there to give the outcome, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think just to clarify your previous statement, members were free to vote whichever way they wanted, but but I'm sure members did. But in order to vote to stop, yes, the motion was against. So there's 10 for, 3 against, and sorry, there's now 10 for and 4 against. Again, one member hasn't been able to vote, but that motion has passed, so the application has not been approved. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Denzel.
Can I just say on my chat bar, it's got 11 for. I don't know.
No, we're fine. 14 responses, so it has been carried that it has been refused. Thank you, Councillor Powell. We now
can I come in there? It's a bit of a concern that if there's 15 of us, we've not got to 15 votes altogether. Is it possible to find out which one of us has obviously got a problem and make sure that he or she is shown how to do it properly?
I believe that John is working on it, Councillor Harris.
I raised this last time, Roger.
Right, thank you. We now go on to the next application, and this is DM/2019/02041, and this is New House Farm, Little Mill, and I believe this is being presented by Andrew, is it? Although I can see Phil on the screen. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Myself is presenting this one. So, Phil, if you could proceed to the slides. So, yeah, this application is presented to you today, members, as the applicant is an officer within the development management team. The site, it's located to the south of Little Mill, as you'll see there, just off the A472 via a long private drive. So, which we just see leading so it's got a substantial driveway. So it's a householder application, and it's proposed to erect a replacement 2-storey extension. We just have a quick look at the photo showing the dwelling. So that extension you can see there with the dormer window, that is the element that would be demolished. There's some significant damp problems, and that's the reason for it being demolished. If you just move through to the plans, it should show that's the layout. It's sat within a small group of buildings, including agricultural storage buildings. So it's that say that existing extension to the side there that is to go. And you can see on the floor plans that's more clearly. Thanks, Phil. So that blue area there is to go. So the proposal would be to erect a new 2-storey extension set down from the main ridge with 3 modest dormers to the front and to the rear. In terms of the external finishes, these would match those of the main dwelling, including timber windows, roof slates, and painted render to the walls. And just to confirm, there are no third-party objections to the proposal. So in terms of the principle, the site is within the open countryside, and therefore policy H6 and its associated SPG are applicable. Now, the SPG sets out a volume limit for extensions to rural dwellings, and certainly for traditional dwellings, of 30% as an upper limit. And in this instance, the proposal would see an overall volume increase of 26%, and therefore accords with that particular policy requirement. But as you've seen from the drawings in general design terms, the extension is still secondary, with the original form of the farmhouse still clear. And as noted, the proposed external materials are appropriate to the rural context. And therefore, given the modest scale of the extension and the dwelling's position within a group of buildings, it's not considered that the proposal would have any adverse wider visual impact. The host dwelling does have bats, and therefore appropriate surveys have been carried out. And subject to the conditions in your report, which I'll just touch on later, no objection is offered by either NRW or the council's own ecologist. And finally, with regard to third-party privacy, the nearest neighbour is approximately 120 metres away, and therefore unlikely to be any harm to neighbouring properties or their amenity or privacy. So a summary is presented there on screen. I would just like to say, with regards to the conditions, condition 3, as set out in the report regarding a conservation plan, we would need to add a line in there that conservation plan is actually implemented and retained in perpetuity. So subject to that small amendment to condition 3, the application is presented to you today, members, with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Andrew, very much indeed. We haven't got a local member here today, and although she is not a member of the planning committee, but she is not able to come today to comment. So I will take hands raised now for any comments, please. Councillor Murphy, I believe you're the first one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Most of us have been to this site before, and I think the question is like the one that Councillor Harris raised it before. If this wasn't related to a member of the planning committee, it would have gone straight through. So I'm more than happy to recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. And my hand is up, but I do not wish to comment, actually. I think it's very difficult sometimes pushing the cursors around. Anybody else wish to comment or ask for any technical advice on this application, please? Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Second Councillor Murphy's approval motion, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Evans, did you wish to comment first, please, before I go to the vote?
Yeah, I was going to second it, but it's already been done.
Right. no other questions, discussions or anything relevant to the application? Then I think Andrew can just sum up very quickly, please, and we'll go to the vote.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is members are voting to approve the householder extension, subject to the conditions in the officer report, with that small amendment to condition 3 to ensure that the conservation plan that's agreed is implemented and retained in perpetuity. So that is what members are voting on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We now have the vote come up in front of us. If you could all kindly place your vote.
Chairman, the wrong voting planning application is before us at the moment.
No, 02041.
Yeah,
Have you voted?
I have now. Yeah.
It's obviously carried. If you wish to give the result, please, Denzel.
Yes, so this time we've only had 11 votes in, but they're all for. So even if the remaining 4 members would all vote against, that motion would still have been passed. So that motion is being passed. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Denzel.
Chair, when we get to the point where these members not voting, it's leaving something missing. I know in this case this has gone through, but the members must make some contribution. If they don't vote for, they got to abstain at least.
I think perhaps some have had technical issues and believe John is working with the ones that have got the issue. If it was a very close vote, I think we would have to take names and like we did in the beginning.
I agree. Okay.
But don't worry, it hasn't been, it has been noted. The next 2 applications that we have before us today, which is 02081 and 00070. I am declaring interest on both of those applications due to being close family members, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Clark, will be chairing it, and I shall be absent from that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. The next application is 02081, a change of use for a barn at Panterry, St Albans, and I think Amy's going to take us through this. Amy?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the application DM 2019-02081 is for the change of use in an existing farm building from agriculture to B1 office use of the existing building. It's before you today as the applicant is a relative of a member of Planning Committee. So it is located to the north of St Albans, slightly to the west of Tintern, and accessed off a long track from the main village of St Albans. The slide in question shows the existing building, which is proposed to be converted to office use by adding cladding to the walls and a new metal insulated roof. The building is within the red square, as you can see on the site plan now. It's located on Panterry Farm, which is between an agricultural building to the south and the converted barn to the north, both residential units. The application originally came in for the conversion to B1 office, also B2 general industrial use and B8 storage. However, officers raised concerns over the latter 2 uses and their compatibility with the adjacent residential properties. Therefore, the applicant has agreed to restrict the proposals to B1 only, and it is that use that you have before you today. The principle of farm diversification is supported by PPW and TAN 6. It's also policy compliant with the LDP policies, subject to certain criteria which are set out fully in the report. The key criteria relate to design, use and sustainability. The slide shows the resultant appearance of the building, so we can just move on a couple of slides. I'll show you the appearance. It is the same size and form of the existing, with timber cladding and a metal sheet roof. So this is not considered to have an adverse visual impact given the current situation. It should be noted that the building sits within the AONB. The building has been used for its intended purposes for some considerable time and has become redundant with current farming practices, and so an alternative use for this building would be beneficial. The location is not unideal for an employment use, being set away from St Arvan's. However, it is considered for the above reasons that supporting the business and farm diversification outweighs these concerns. The development is not of a large-scale employer, and it is speculative and of a scale that sits within the environment in utilising the existing building with no additions or extensions. In addition, it's also proposed to add a condition restricting the use, and that is office use, from 8 AM until 6 PM every day, given the current residential properties either side. There are no objections from highways. The existing access is considered to be acceptable and adequate parking can be accommodated on the site. The site will also require a full sustainable drainage approval. Foul drainage will be a package treatment plant located on the to the field east of the building, and full details of this will be covered by a condition. There are no objections for ecology. Surveys have been carried out and they are all considered acceptable, with a request from a condition controlling lighting to be added. There were objections from Tintern Community Council based on the use of the building, and they welcome the reduction of the use to B1. However, they still maintain their concerns. Overall, the application is considered to be policy compliant, and the use of the building as office supports the diversification of the farm and the wider rural economy, which outweighs any concerns over the location. Therefore, the application before you for the change of use of the existing building to B1 office use is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report.
Thank you, Amy. Anne, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in first?
Yes, thank you. It's in my ward. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Amy, for this report, and also to thank you to Kate. It's I think she's covered every aspect of this application in her report. The new use as an office, I quite agree with. But I think most members have been there. They will remember going along this track and we thought we were never going to come to the end of it. I think most members have been there already. So I would support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Roger, you've got your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with Anne. The only condition I'm looking at is 6. Which the premises shall not be used for the approved purposes outside the following times: 8 AM to 6 PM on any day. Does that really mean any day? Does that include Saturday and Sunday? It's surprising if that is the case.
Amy?
As the condition is worded, yes, I would include Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay, Roger?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Interesting one, that.
Yeah. Okay, Louise, your hand is up next.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've looked at this application, but I do have some concerns about it because my understanding is that the LDP requires employment use to be located sort of close to the adjoining boundaries of villages, and this is down a long, arduous route. I don't think it's a suitable location for office accommodation because of where it's sited, because of the fact that it's, you know, obviously in isolated locations, there's problems with broadband, and even with 5G, you need to have the proper infrastructure for it. Also, I can't see why policy RE3 doesn't apply here, because it seems to be that there doesn't seem to be any particular business case that's been put forward. So to suggest it's just RE2, I think I found very odd in relation to the wording of the policies, and I think that so I don't think the case is proven with regard to the policies. In terms of being in an unsustainable location, I think there's going to be plenty of office space available with people working at home, and why would people want to come along a very arduous route to get to that without a potential good internet connection, or basically the Planning Policy Wales also argues for sustainable locations, so that basically you don't have to rely on the private car. Anybody coming along this single track road will have to rely on the private car. So I don't think that the policies here have been properly considered, and the relevant policies here either, because RE3 basically and the explanation with RE3 on page 118 of the local development plan seem to suggest that this is the one that's applicable, not the RE2. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Do you want to answer that, Amy?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So there is an agricultural planning statement or planning appraisal that was submitted as part of the application that shows the existing use of the farm and why the building is now redundant. I think the proposals for office use, yes, they're not in an ideal situation. However, I think recent events have shown us that how we are working from home will change, and we want to support the rural diversification of farms and the rural economy, and it is considered that these proposals do that, and the benefits do outweigh the harm of the location. In terms of the applicable nature of RE2 and RE3, within the information in the application, there was also an appeal provided in relation to another property in the south of the county, where a very similar application came forward, and the inspector drew a conclusion that this was an appropriate use, or office was an appropriate use outside a main village or town, given the very similar context. So I think in relation to those two policies, we followed the previous inspector's recommendations and applied them accordingly, because the situation is exactly the same, or very similar, I should say.
I think I'm actually looking at the wording, and it says the proposal is supported by an appropriate business case which demonstrates the link to existing business activity and the benefits of the scheme in terms of sustaining employment / the rural economy. And I don't think that the report provides the policy requirement that's here, and obviously it's contrary to the PPW policy Wales, which is about a sustainable location, because it requires public transport down cars down sort of a very isolated location. So I do have concerns about that, and I don't think it complies with the wording of RE3, regardless of obviously we have to start with our policies to start with, and it's also not in an adjoint employment use is supposed to be adjoining to a main village or in the boundaries of, not a long track away from. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. The next person who wishes to speak is Maureen Powell. Councillor Powell.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Chairman. I'm unmuted, I think. Well, I would like to second this, because I don't see a problem. If you're working from home, you're a long way. You can be a long way away from somewhere, and you can work for 12 hours or whatever. I forgot what the hours were there, but you can work for any many hours. You're only going to that building once to go to it and once to go back again. So I think where it isn't a problem. I think it's a good thing to have more workplaces out in the countryside instead of everybody being crammed together in built-up areas. So I would second this.
Thank you, Councillor. Craig, would you wish to come in at this moment? Craig?
Sorry, Councillor Clark. It might be worth taking Councillor Howard's and Councillor Dubby's questions, and then I'll sum up then if you like. Yeah,
OK, thank you. Councillor Dubby? Are you there, David?
Yes, are you receiving me?
We are loud and clear.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'm pretty sure I know the location of this place. I have the main concern I have, as you rightly say, it's a long track to the main road. But when you are exiting the site, it is a difficult one in terms of visibility when you come to join the main road. It is also a bit of a problem when you're slowing down to turn into the track, because people who don't know that there is a track there can be a little surprised that all of a sudden the car in front of them is slowing down to about 10-15 mile an hour. So my concern is basically that I would want to see the entrance and exit from the site improved. With regard to the business opportunities there, I think there are business opportunities for offices throughout the whole of Chepstow now, with a lot of people who have migrated from Bristol, if you like, searching for office space to work from home, in inverted commas. So I think there will be a use for it, but I'm concerned about the access and the egress from the site and safety. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Giles Howard.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. I've listened to to Louise's comments about the sustainability of the site, and I understand her concerns, but I don't necessarily agree with them in this case. So I think perhaps her concerns almost answer themselves in that, given the location of the site and the fact it is set away from anywhere reasonably convenient or settlements, then you have to ask yourself, well, who would actually want to occupy a unit if they needed to have those, or that settlement, or the facilities or services within that settlement close by. And what I was thinking about in terms of the B1 use class, it does include industrial processes that aren't going to be or aren't likely to cause detriment to any adjoining residential areas. So it could be some sort of craft or local artisan business. It could be a diversification of the farm. And on that basis, I think that's probably going to be far better located there than maybe a town centre or an existing industrial estate location, which probably wouldn't be very convenient in the slightest. So, you know, given the context of the site and the background of it and the restriction to the B1 use, I think it's acceptable.
Thank you, Giles. Councillor Anne Webb.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask David, Councillor Dovey, which road he is concerned about, the access onto the main road through St Albans? Because to my knowledge, the access to this farm building is a straight building and the road surface is fairly good. Thank you.
Are you listening, Councillor Dovey?
Yes, Chairman, it is the main road. That is, I wasn't saying the surface, etc., isn't good. I have a concern that on occasion there is a lot of traffic on that road, and I'm just concerned for the safety of people entering and coming out of the site, because I think it is potentially, with more people using it, a bit of a hazard, and I don't want to see anybody caught in a smack there. Simple as that.
Thank you, David. And the last one on my list is Councillor Sheila Woodhouse.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to what the members have said, and obviously going through this comprehensive report, I think I would like to support diversification, to support our rural economy. I think is most important. We've lots of examples of this type of businesses being carried out in country areas, country locations, and if it helps the rural economy and it puts buildings back into use, then I would like to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There's nobody else has their hand up. Would somebody like to move the proposal one way or the other?
I have been moved, Chair.
Thank you, whoever that was.
Matt Feakins for approval.
Thank you, Matt. And
Yeah,
seconded
a second. Thank
by
you.
Anne Webb. Can you all now go to the vote, please?
Would you like me to clarify what we're voting on?
Yeah, we're voting to accept it.
Yeah. As the officer's report with the suggested conditions in the report.
Okay, you've got the vote in front of you now. Please all vote. Oops. Move it around, the bloody thing. It won't take it.
So with the chair having vacated the meeting, there are now 14 councillors present, 13 have voted, so again one's not been able to vote, but there's 12 for and 1 against, which means that even if that one member had been able to vote again, the motion would have passed, so that motion is passed.
Chairman, could I just say I'm concerned that it might be my vote, because I'm pressing the button for or against, and then you have the submit button, and mine isn't always lighting up, having voted for, and then it says submit. I don't know whether that there should be a confirmation from that. I'm just wondering whether it is mine. I'm making the vote, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's the submit part of it is working properly.
Right. Yeah, it is carried. We've only got one vote we can't find, and obviously if it voted against, which would still have been passed. So on that motion, we'll have to accept it. You've got one more application. Go on, David.
Could I just say there is consistently one that seems to be missing, and if it is a help to the officers, I'm just wondering whether it is my particular laptop that isn't doing it.
While we deal with the next application, David, the technical department will check it and I'll let you know.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair.
Okay, on to the last application of the afternoon in Raglan Park Farm, and it's number 0070. And Phil, you're taking us through this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so you're all familiar with this site. It's one we've looked at a few times in the past to do with signs and then change of use of land to a car park. This is one particular sign of the group of signs that were approved last time. It's marked with a star there. It's on the main road as you leave Raglan coming south towards the group of buildings where the farm shop and children's play area, etc. is located. That's what it used to look like. It was set up on pallets. And that was as it was approved previously in the group of signs that were approved, and that's as it's been changed now. So it is a retention of sign. It's been raised up on supports, on posts, to allow better visibility from Brooks Cottage, which is just to the north there, where the photo is taken from, whose junction looks towards that bend, and you can just see a little bit further on from the sign towards that bend as a result of the sign being lifted up. So it is better in terms of visibility and highway safety in that respect. And then that's showing where it is. It's sign number 7 on that one. And those are the key material issues. So there's no objection from Highways, and the Raglan Community Council also recommend approval, as do officers. So it's now before members to consider. So we'd recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Chair, you're on mute.
Councillor David Evans, you have your hand up. David, can you hear me?
Yes. If this hadn't been a related to a planning committee member, it wouldn't have been in front of us. So no. I got no objections at all. I had to propose we accept the application.
Okay. And Matthew Feakins?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak on the matter? No. Then we'll go to the vote, please. Put the chart up yet. The chart. I need the chart. We're voting. Just be patient, it's coming.
See if we get a full house this time.
Well, we should do, shouldn't we? We've got to get the House to vote on first.
Yeah.
House time.
Check your emails after, Peter, about the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Oh, thank you very much.
You changed the dates there. We've gone back to Friday now.
Is it?
Yeah. We went to Thursday, back to Friday. I said we weren't available.
No, we got something else there, didn't we?
Audit, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, there we are.
Right, you've got it up now. Please vote. Still 3 of you at least to vote, maybe 4. David, you have been recorded as voting, so it's not you. Anyway, at the moment we've got 10 for, nobody against and nobody abstaining, so it will be passed.
Yeah, so 4 members haven't been able to vote this time, as you say, Chair. So yes, it's 10 for, no against that motion.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I will now hand you back to the chairman to complete the meeting.
Chair, you're on mute. I'm on mute again. Thank you very much, Chair. Vice Chair, you did a sterling job. We can now continue with the next, well, it's the end of the applications for today, but we have information from the Planning Inspectorate on appeals. Who wishes to present those? Is it you, Phil?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Phil
I'll do
or
that.
Craig?
I can do that, Chair. That's no problem.
Right, thank you, Craig. I believe we have some additional ones as well.
Phil,
That
could
have
you
been
put
handed.
Phil, the appeals up?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's just for planning committee members' information, really, in terms of the 3 applications which are in front of you on the screen at the moment. 3 appeal decisions. All appeals were dismissed by the Planning Inspectorate, so positive outcomes in terms of council decision making. Really, really good in terms of they were all officer decisions and all backed by the Planning Inspector. I'll just give you a little bit of information in regards to each one. So 10 Yew Tree Wood, Chepstow, a single-storey side and rear extension, proposed raised timber deck and a new access gate. This was refused by officers in relation to the design and scale of the extension. Also concerns with regards to the amenity impact and parking provision at the site. The Planning Inspectorate did find that the dwelling would have sufficient parking, so unfortunately didn't agree with the council's decision regarding that matter. It also reviewed the residential amenity impact and found that the development, even though it was a 2.4 metre fence adjacent to a boundary, planning officers considered this to be too high. The Planning Inspectorate felt that on balance it was acceptable, so removed that element, but did agree with the council and officers with regards to the design and scale of the extension, so refused it on those grounds, so that appeal was dismissed. The second application there, it's 33 Kimmin Road, the Kimmin. This was an application to remove permitted development rights, which outlined that development should be retained for a holiday let only and not have its permitted development rights to extend. Council officers refused this planning application and delegated powers, based on the policy to respect the character and appearance of rural countryside and to ensure that we have buildings which are suitable for holiday use, rather than buildings which could be excessively extended and could have residential permanent use in the future. Planning Inspectorates did agree with officers on this policy matter and have dismissed the appeal, outlining that the development should be retained as a holiday let and also not have its permitted development rights to extend any further. And so that does give us quite a good indication in terms of our tourism policies and how we frame them going forward. The final application was at the Lodge, Mountway in Chepstow. That was for a new dwelling within the curtilage of a listed building and within a conservation area. Planning officers reviewed that planning application and did refuse it on a couple of grounds. One with regards to the setting and appearance of the listed building and the character and appearance of the conservation area, and another on highways considerations and highway safety. And the planning inspector didn't agree with officers with regards to the highway safety element of it and didn't feel there was a concern with regards to the proposed access to the dwelling. However, it did agree that the proposed dwelling would have harmful impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, and it wouldn't aim to preserve it. So it was the planning inspector did agree with our judgment on that. So 3 cases there. Planning inspector all dismissed all planning appeals. So in terms of decision making, it's a good reflection of where we are in terms of our policy making. So that's it, just a brief indication of where we are with appeals. There's just for members' information, Chair.
Thank you for that, Craig. Richard has handed me 2 appeal addresses. Are they to be discussed now or later?
Yes, they're just appeals that have been received recently.
Right, that's fine.
We can email them to members so they're aware of them.
Right, thank you very much for that, Craig. Any other business?
Sorry, Chair, I raised my hand. I just wanted to know if I should declare an interest. I mean, this is mainly an information item, but I do know the applicant for the 3rd application that's been mentioned on the screen.
Yes.
Do I need to declare an interest or not, as it's just an information item?
No, it's just Chair, Chair, do you want me to speak to answer that? Yes. Councillor Brown, this is just for your information, so it's just a reflection of what's happened. It's just, these are facts more than anything.
Yeah, I was just checking.
Right, I think that concludes all our applications and so on today and our appeals decisions, but we still have the minutes to be signed off for the beginning of March, which seems a very long time ago, although work has been carrying on. As we know, the officers have been busy as well, and so it is just for accuracy only. So are there any reasons that anybody should question the minutes of the beginning of March?
I'm happy to move the minutes, Chair.
Right, Councillor Feakin moved them. Do you have a seconder for the minutes of March, please?
Yes.
Sorry? Who is that second?
Phil.
Right, that is moved as and approved and seconded. So we will take that and I will sign this now in the office at the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much indeed for your attendance. We've got through it and I wish you all safe journey. Well, most of you are at home, but I am not. So please keep safe wherever you are. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance and getting us through what is quite momentous, doing video conferencing with planning, which can be fraught with a lot of dangers, even if you're all in the chamber. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bye.
Well done. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.